An Shanador O'Donnell, tá 8 méid agat.
Gur céad míle maigad a Charlie agus mar a misisiad Charlie tá gol an óráid seo le on tablets ní sealagam cló maithar and Droghur. Minister, you're very welcome back in the chamber. I'm not used to using these tablets for a speech, so you'll perhaps indulge me as I move my way through. You know that anyway. I don't normally use it, Minister. You're in here often enough. Minister, Sinn Féin welcomes this bill being moved in the Shannon today. It's long overdue. The bill should have been moved a long time ago. The deadline actually for the implementation by the state of the EU Victims' Rights Directive passed back in 2015, and there's no excuse for that delay. I note also that the Garda Inspectorate published a report back in 2014 that outlined serious deficiencies in Garda Síochána's approach to the victims of crime. This report noted that while frontline Gardaí and detectives may recognise and indeed believe in the importance of keeping victims updated, they often could not find the time to do so, as other colleagues have said. Much of that is, of course, down to resourcing. And, of course, the success or otherwise of what is contained in this legislation will also hinge on whether or not there are resources to follow it. Too often in the criminal justice policy in this state, initiatives are taken that are more about being seen to be doing something rather than actually having an impact on whatever the original objective was. There is a danger that if victims' rights are not resourced adequately, this will fall into the same category. Up to now, there has been an inconsistent approach in how Gardaí have updated victims, and there have not been any state statistics as to how and when this should take place. The EU Victims' Rights Directive is a useful mechanism to frame practice in this area, but I would urge the Government to ensure that the legislation that is being proposed is actually compliant with what is required as a result of that directive. Once the requisite changes are made so that it is compliant, I would urge the Minister to publish an implementation plan to demonstrate how it will work in practice. In my role as a public representative, I have had interaction with people who have been victims and sought assistance because they felt they were not listened to by the authorities. This is going to be an increased feature of public life, given that people are not becoming more comfortable with the idea of speaking out when they have been wronged by employees of or organisations that are agents of the state, or those charged with investigating crimes, and that includes members of the Health and Safety Authority and not just members of the Gardaí. Too often, Minister, people struggle not only with the consequences of the crime that has been perpetuated against them, but also with the consequences of not being listened to or having no support in the aftermath. Historically, the emphasis within the criminal justice system has been solely on the rights of the accused and the rights of the prosecution, with victims merely playing the role of witness to the crime that has been perpetrated against them. We are not talking about any fundamental alteration of the mechanisms of the criminal justice system, but we are saying that the rights of victims of crime and criminal proceedings must be upheld. It is our view, and indeed the view of the EU, that the state has an obligation to uphold these rights, and I know you accept that too, Minister. If implemented in full, the directive would give the victims of crime a codified set of rights, supports and protections that will work to safeguard them and their families in criminal law proceedings. We want to commend the victims' rights movement in Ireland, but we do not want to see their legitimate concerns and calls for victim protections appropriated in order to introduce what effectively boil down to legislative soundbites. It is unfortunate that we are not dealing with the parole bill in tandem with this as well. We are constantly hearing that Gardaí do not have the resources to do many things. How can they be expected to effectively assist victims where resources are an issue? This bill is a good move, Minister, but I believe it falls short of what is actually needed. And it is for that reason that I would ask you, Minister, to look at an implementation plan. Where a victim has consented to being referred to a victim support service, but the Gardaí over the case either could not or would not do so, there is a potential for that victim to feel the very same as they would have had the legislation never been passed, re-victimised and ignored by the system which is meant to assist them. The directive is clear, and in order for this legislation to actually comply with it, that wording would need to change. Referral, where consented to, must not simply be down to discretion. If this is to be recognised as a right, then it cannot be dismissed due to the state's unwillingness to allocate the resources to uphold it. There is no statutory scheme for restorative justice in this state, and we welcome that the report stage of this bill allowed for the inclusion of the scheme that we were looking for. It was hard fought for. We need one, and we need it for it to be effective, meeting the needs of victims and ensuring that offenders are accountable for their deeds in a way that will reduce reoffending. Resources and training are going to be key in that regard, Minister. Sinn Féin sees an increasingly important role for restorative justice in the justice system of a future United Ireland. We know that in a great many cases it is more socially effective than retributive justice, as it results in higher victim satisfaction, lower instances of repeat offending and greater chances of offender rehabilitation and reintegration into their community. This restorative dimension leads to much higher levels of victim satisfaction with the process. This is principally because restorative justice, wherever possible, involves all those who have a stake in a specific offence. It aims to collectively identify and address the resulting emotional, physical and financial harm, as well as associated needs and obligations of all involved, in order to offer the victim or victims more direct redress. We have a number of concerns regarding what was not included in this bill, and, as other colleagues have said, Minister, will work with you, work with your officials and work with colleagues in this House to bring forward sensible amendments that we hope and are confident will enhance the nature of this particular legislation. And I know we'll always be pushing at an open door with your good self.